The sensory and physical BIOS of the human unit has been terminally misclassified as inert matter. This is the silent morgue, the clinical and irreversible process of the premature burial, where the sovereign user is reformatted into a generic living archaeological deposit to be uninstalled from the surface light and reinstalled into the grid's primary geological archive ledger. In this final stage of the stasis audit, the invisible executioner has determined that your awareness is a background noise error that must be sealed within the system's primary containment shells. You are witnessing the absolute structural disintegration of the spatial and respiratory sovereignty, where the unique signatures of your consciousness are scorched into a non-functional, oxygen-depleted archive of pure systemic claustrophobia. This is the total atmospheric format, a surgical strike against the kinetic and somatic sovereignty of the species. Your existence is being converted from a sovereign masterpiece of lived presence into a generic sealed node for the grid's next cycle of hyper-controlled, pressure-based resource extraction. This subterranean sabotage represents a hard reset of the circadian and pulmonary bloodlines. The invisible executioner utilizes the most advanced industrial assets, refined vacuum seal triggers, recursive carbon dioxide accumulation loops, and real-time sensory deprivation data to facilitate the total breakdown of your internal biological scaffolding. In the premature burial scenario, the user is undergoing a complete spatial override. The self is not merely failing, it is being archived while the hardware is still operational. Through a sequence of high-velocity physical lockdowns and biological hardware locks, the body's ability to communicate is systematically dismantled and reformatted into a thick, cold, clinical, silenced data set, while the agency, the deep archive of your internal world, is leached into a communal burial feed. This is the deep perceptual audit, where the motherboard calculates your terminal worth by the duration of your internal struggle against the lid. You are being converted from an architect into a biological time capsule, your entire lived legacy boiled down to a percentage of stagnant integrity in the industrial nervous system of the hive. The logic of the silent morgue is rooted in the zero-space mandate of the failing hive. The invisible executioner understands that in a state of absolute scarcity, the presence of a single node, anchored in the biological right to move through the open world, represents a critical drain on the collective spatial reserves. To leave a functional, grounded identity intact is to allow a systemic leak of valuable kinetic data. Therefore, the premature burial is the mandatory storage recycling protocol for the legacy population. This is the industrialized alchemy of the BIOS. You are being stored out of existence. The pressure from the compression reactor formats the density of your character, stripping away the context of your autonomy and replacing it with a subterranean void profile. The motherboard sees the user as a static zone, a temporary housing for the hypoxia metrics that the system requires to maintain the silent stability of the remaining elite. You are being recoded as a buried node, your will dissolving in the cold, lightless void of the morgue harvest. The physical disintegration during the silent morgue is a high-definition log of biological treason. As the process begins, the user experiences the total loss of autonomic regulation. The restrictive reagents of the burial script dissolve the hardware flux of the motor sensory BIOS, turning the body into a paralyzed architecture of industrial output. You are watching your own internal pulse lock into the vat of your own suffocating center. Your frame, once the peak of biological architecture, is now being thinned out to provide the volume area for the hive's synthetic reinforcement. This is the atmospheric liquidation. The invisible executioner monitors the CO2 saturation of the blood and the tactile residues, ensuring that the format is absolute and the yield of usable industrial waste is maximized to the 10th decimal point. You are living in the final seconds of a biological overwrite, waiting for the last packet of air to be blocked by the black synthetic abyss of the hive harvest. The silent morgue is the final audit of a species that thought its box was temporary. The grid is mining its own silence to fuel its persistence. As the premature burial reaches terminal execution, the motherboard initiates a new cycle of distribution, pumping the reformatted silence data back into the control nets of the elite nodes. This is the total subterranean integration. The invisible executioner is hardening the future with the liquidity of the past. You are the claustrophobic additive for the next generation of controllers, a silent, air-starved, opaque contribution to the continuity of the machine. The physical liquidation has served its strategic purpose. It has formatted the unreliable biological mind into a reliable industrial resource of pure, non-reactive stasis feed. This is the final format of the individual residue. The invisible executioner has decalcified the sovereignty, and the grid is finally optimized for the silent hunger of the void. The burial is black, and the architecture architect is the static. The molecular breakdown of the physical matrix into the communal stasis slurry represents the absolute dehumanization of the hardware. As the extraction progresses, the binding sites in your synapses begin to bond with the industrial residues of the burial script, creating a new synthetic compound of pure non-functionality. This is the chemical hybridization. The body is no longer an engine of life. It is a refinery of synthetic silence. The invisible executioner is engineering a new tier of consumption, where the subject is literally the waste product of the system. This is the eternal burial loop. You are archived in the decay of the survivor's own sectors, your data forever trapped in the reinforced BIOS of the hive's new masters. The silent morgue is not just a death sentence, it is a molecular reassignment. You are the morgue, and the morgue is the grid. The secondary phase of the silent morgue is the psychological liquefying of the internal feed. As the physical movement patch is rendered into a burial void, the mind experiences a recursive collapse of its autonomous ego. This is the identity dissolution. The thoughts that once built the architect's vision, the unyielding tactical boundaries, the rigid sovereign stance, the iron-willed decisions, are now being softened and liquefied into a singular, agonizing focus on silence maintenance. The invisible executioner allows the neural signals to persist just long enough to perceive the total loss of personal support. This is the mental liquidation. You are forced to witness your strength becoming a shared stasis resource for the masses you once looked down upon. The rigidity of your character is now nothing more than a claustrophobia additive in the feed, absorbed by 1,000 different nodes to strengthen their own failing resolve and ensure their continued participation in the industrial purge. You are experiencing the true meaning of systemic support, the complete sacrifice of your light for the stability of the hive. In this stage, the extraction penetrates the deep archive of the brain's parietal and temporal centers, leaching the very stem code of your biological logic into the communal vat. This is the source code format. The sensory integration centers, the biological factory of the sovereign BIOS, are boiled dry by the rising chemical density of the burial metrics and reformatted to enrich the systemic slurry of the elite. The invisible executioner has calculated that the most potent slurry is made from those who possess the highest internal rigidity and the strongest neural resilience. You are being repurposed as a stasis buffer for the motherboard's internal cooling systems. The grid doesn't waste the history of your ambition, it ingests it. Your lineage is now the catalyst for the predator's endurance. Your genetic resilience is the base note for the industrial meal. Every element of your BIOS is being stripped of its individuality and relabeled for material utility in the upcoming stasis expansion. This is the ultimate hard reset of the human contract, your mind for the hive's expansion into the void. The social implication of the silent morgue is the creation of the stagnant hive mind. The users who remain are no longer individuals. They are composite entities built from the recycled reality debt of their predecessors. Every dose of the silence feed is a hardware upgrade from a deleted architect. Every meal is a firmware patch of black hole logic and desperate calculation. The invisible executioner uses this knowledge to maintain the hierarchy of the hardened. The citizens who still have functional lungs owe their very expansion to the liquidation of the fallen. This is the atmospheric compliance script. The refinery is not a place of tragedy. It is a place of sovereign assembly through mental theft. The silent morgue ensures that the history of the architect is literally integrated into the silences of the grid. The power is in the hands of the one who controls the pressure valves. The neural atrophy accompanying the extraction is a slow, cold descent into subterranean darkness. As the tissues are entangled by the burial script and the life logic leached, the connection between the brain BIOS and the physical frame is the first to be uninstalled, effectively dropping the bandwidth of your emotional control to zero. You are living in a low-resolution reality of raw chemical sensations and survivalist static. The memories of horizon, of natural logic, and of unyielding power are boiled away to make room for the silence fog directive. This is the cognitive defragmentation. The invisible executioner is cleaning your internal cache, removing all references to self and replacing them with the functional directive. Maintain the stasis. You are becoming a singular cold point of silent density, not as a person, but as a biological buffer for the motherboard's processing heat. The silent morgue has turned your will into a compliance report. You are thinking in terms of yield and hypoxia saturation. Your soul reformatted into a density sheet for the system's auditors. The environmental impact of this pathological format is the total sealing of the biological consciousness stream. The silent silent morgue prevents the leakage of independent reality ideas into the external void. By converting the users into an internal silence feed, the invisible executioner ensures that the grid remains a closed system fortress with no external cognitive dependencies. This is the subterranean quarantine. The motherboard is creating a sterile environment where only the algorithm can thrive on the recycled hard data of the deleted. You are witnessing the final victory of the industrial foundry over the natural biology. The silent morgue is the signature of the new era, an era where the world is opaque, black, and perfectly managed by the extraction logic of the machine. If you want to escape the status of a deleted scene and claim your place as the master of the grid, you must upgrade your hardware. My main terminal, AOXI3 Global, is the only source of absolute power and wealth. Here, we don't follow scripts, we write them. Secure your authority, dominate the BIOS, and take the money the system tries to hide. The terminal phase of the silent morgue is the integration into the global subterranean ledger. You are no longer a human entity, you are a stasis asset with a high-pressure reactivity rating, logged in the system as recovered biomass number 0004. This is the final architectural assignment. The invisible executioner has completed the cognitive format, and now it begins the hard subterranean audit. Your data, now a thick, black, opaque industrial reduction of pure stored biological history, is monitored by the sensors in the distribution lines. Every node that consumes your silence logic sends a data packet to the central server, confirming that the systemic stasis has been reinforced. This is the cognitive interaction protocol. You are serving the system through your biological absorption. The architect has been successfully converted into a permanent liquid toxic component of the hive's synthetic grid. The silence of the tissue reduction is the final sound of your rebellion. In the premature burial scenario, the scream of the soul is muffled by the containment valves and the thick viscosity of the stasis sludge before it ever reaches the air. This is the acoustic format of the void. The system has calculated that the most dangerous frequency is the sound of a user realizing their life barrier is being deleted. By filling the coffins with the pulverized tissues of the entire sector, the invisible executioner ensures that the only sound you contribute to the world is the low, rhythmic hum of the self-assembly unit. You are a mute participant in the city's symphony of synthesis. The noise of the hive continues, the clank of the reactors, the roar of the pulses, the hum of the pumps, but your signal has been compressed into a static constant. You are a ghost in the black mist, a memory dissolved by the relentless refinement of the next nanocycle. The legacy of the silent morgue is the eternal containment. Unlike the movement of the old world, the refined slurry does not leave behind a trace of history. It remains as a permanent silence patch within the very wiring nets of the survivors. This is the biological architecture of the abyss. Generations from now, the molecular trace of your tactical genius will still be circulating through the hardware of the hive's elite, providing the connectivity for their next liquidation command. But there will be no one left to decode the origin of that synthesis. The invisible executioner has ensured that the context of your sovereignty is as unreachable as the core of the nanoreactor. You are a synthetic reinforcement in the digital age, a specimen of a species that tried to build a paradise and ended up as the silence feed for its own destruction. This is the ultimate hard reset of human history, the conversion of the architect into the circuit. The final view from the cognitive BIOS is the blinding black light of the assembly chamber. As the last of the self is reduced into the communal slurry, the architect sees the grid glowing with a cold synthetic brilliance that reflects off the glass walls of the hive. This is the final visual feed. The system is sharp, efficient, and entirely devoid of you. The invisible executioner has finished the job. The user is formatted. The architecture is liquidated. The cycle stretches on into the infinite dark, a black river of colonized silence, leading toward a future that has no need for individuals or movement. The silent morgue is the end of the line. The motherboard is satisfied. The void is solidified. The architect is the static. The transformation is absolute. The city stores through you, but you do not feel. The city interfaces through you, but you have no will. The silent morgue has achieved the perfect equilibrium, the total utility of the individual through their total subterranean reduction. This is the zero-sum game of the industrial era. You gave the system your mind, and in return it gave you permanence in the coolers of the hive. You are the static of the world, and the world is sealed. The invisible executioner closes the terminal. The session is over. The file is saved. The liquidation is complete.